All right, welcome for variables and expressions lesson. Go ahead and get started in the next one. Mr. Romanovich joined us again, wearing the exact same thing we were in the last video.
Different day.
Yeah, we don't do laundry. We just wear the same thing a couple days in a row.
We sleep here.
It'd be scary if it wasn't so close to being true. Our learning standard is 6EE2. Read and evaluate expressions in which letters stand for numbers, and our I can statement. I can evaluate, fancy word for I can do the problem and find an answer, by substituting in a number in place of a variable.
So one of the keys to this is understanding now the new ways that we're going to talk about multiplications and how we can write it. So we're going to go away from using an X. And these are some of the ways. So if we put a giant dot between them, so different than a decimal, that's the same as saying 2 times 3. If we use my favorite, which is some parentheses,
you're going to see that a lot in 7th and 8th grade.
If we gather those together, that then indicates 4 times 12, which then is 48. And then when we get the variable in there, then we just have the same thing. Now it's 5 times t.
So there's really kind of a hidden multiplication sign in between those two when they're right next to each other.
And then with variable next to variable, it's the same thing. It's still multiplication happening, so that is s times t.
So these are all different ways of seeing multiplication written. You're going to see a lot of these last two today. You're going to see a little bit more of this one as we go along, but this is one to really get used to. When there's nothing next to that parentheses, no addition or subtraction, that's when we really know it's talking about multiplication.
So here we've got how this is going to work. So what we'll do is we've been given expressions with variables, and then we'll substitute in the value that's provided to us. So for instance, this is saying that m equals 2 and n equals 16. So the first thing we'll do is we'll substitute in and rewrite the expression. So it needs to say 2 plus 16. And we know that equals 18, but you have to write the expression. We're just putting the training wheels on, and then once we get past these types where they get a lot more complicated, then you'll understand why we're putting it in specifically. The next one then is mn, which is indicating multiplication. So that would be 2 times 16, which is 32. And then we have 3m plus 5. So m equals 2, so I would write that as 3, and then parentheses would be my thing. Or Mr. McKenzie can use a dot.
Mr. Romanovich is getting all fancy. I mean, going with his parentheses. I'm all right with it.
And then we have to remember our order of ops. So order of ops says we do multiplication or division before addition or subtraction. So 3 times 2 is 6, and then 6 plus 5 is 11.
All right, so this gives us a good chance. I know order of operations says parentheses is first. One thing to think about in these problems is there's nothing going on inside the parentheses. There's nothing to actually do in the parentheses. In this case, it's really just signaling, like Mr. Romanovich said, it's multiplication. So you're not doing anything to 2, you're just multiplying 3 times 2. So it's a little different from some of our bigger order of operation problems. All right, now we're ready for some real problems. A little bit more fun. We want to do 4x plus 8. It tells us that x is equal to 3, y is equal to 12, and z is equal to 8. So copy all this down, and then like Mr. Romanovich said, you can't jump to an answer just because you do it in your head. You've got to show us how did you rewrite the expression with the numbers in place, and then go ahead and find your answer. So 4x, when they're right next to each other, it means 4 times x. In this case, x is 3, so 4 times, I have no idea why I wrote it that way, 4 times 3 plus 8. Then what order of operations says multiply first. 4 times 3 is 12, plus 8 is 20. Go ahead with the next one.
So this one has x times y minus z. So x we know is 3, and that's going to be multiplied by 12. And then we're going to subtract 8 from it. Order of ops, we do multiplication first. 3 times 12 is 36. Minus 8 is 28. Take away 6, take away 2.
I had to double check, but you're right. Glad you knew that one. All right, next one, z squared minus 10. So our x, y, and z values are the same as the last slide, so that's not new, but 2 new problems. Z to the second power, z is 8, so 8 squared minus 10. Be careful you don't make that obvious mistake of just thinking this is 8 times 2. Remember, your exponent is 8 times 8, 2 8s being multiplied. So that gives us 64. Minus 10 gives us an answer of 54. And I saved the hard one for Mr. Romanovich.
All right, here we go. So we have 2xz minus 3y. So let's just start putting this in. So we have 2 times x times z, which means 2 times 3 times 8. And we're going to subtract from that 3 times 12. So the way Mr. Mackenzie wrote this, so we're going to do inside those parentheses first, which would give us 2 times 3 times 8 minus 36.
I have to give myself a little bit more room.
And then we would do our multiplication from left to right. 2 times 3 is 6 times 8 minus 36. And then we've got 48 minus 36, which is 12. An even dozen.
So be careful on this one. An easy mistake to make on this one is thinking, oh, there's an x in between. That means 2 times z. Remember, we don't use x for multiplication anymore. It's 2 times whatever x is times whatever z is. We'll do some more practice with this tomorrow.
Woohoo!